Hey, Liam. Perfect timing. I was just thinking about you.
That sounds interesting. What's going on?
I'm finally going to the Empire State Building today. I still can't believe it. Ever since I was a kid, I've dreamed of seeing New York from the top.
That's amazing, Emma. You're going to love it. The view is completely unforgettable.
I hope so. But there's one thing making me secretly nervous. People always say Americans are super friendly. What if someone asks me about my dreams, my goals, or why I came to New York? What if I sound awkward or robotic?
Emma, that's actually one of the easiest problems to solve. Let's fix it right now. If you only remember 3 expressions from today's lesson, remember these. Instead of just saying, I want to, say, I've always wanted to, I'd love to, or my goal is to.
Wait, does changing just those few words really make that big of a difference?
Absolutely. Listen to the difference. First, I want to visit New York. Perfectly correct, right? Now, listen again. I've always wanted to visit New York. Can you hear the difference?
Wow, yeah. The second one feels so much warmer. It sounds like there's a real story behind it.
Exactly. That's why native speakers use it constantly. They're not just stating a fact, they're sharing a personal moment.
I never noticed that.
Most learners don't. But today, you'll learn how native speakers naturally express their goals. And before we finish, I'll share one simple question that keeps conversations about dreams flowing naturally.
I've been looking at pictures of the Empire State Building all week. Every time I see one, I get even more excited. I honestly think that when I get to the top, I'll probably spend the first few minutes just staring at the city.
Most people do. Something interesting happens when people see a view like that. They naturally stop talking about everyday things. Nobody looks over New York and says, "So, how was work today?"
Probably not.
Instead, people start talking about experiences, dreams, and places they've always wanted to visit. It's one of those spots that naturally makes you reflect.
That actually makes so much sense. When I think about standing there, I don't just think about the buildings. I think about everything it took to finally get there, all my dreams and my goals for the future.
Exactly. And that's why you'll hear expressions like, "I've always wanted to come here," or "This has been on my bucket list forever," or "I still can't believe I'm finally here."
They're not just describing the Empire State Building, they're describing how they feel, right?
Spot on, Emma. Native speakers connect places with emotions, not just facts. And that's one of the easiest ways to sound natural in English. Instead of just describing what you see, describe what you're experiencing.
I love that idea. It feels so much more personal.
People connect with stories, not descriptions. If you say, "I've always dreamed of seeing this view," you give them a reason to connect. They might ask, "Really? What made you want to come here?" And just like that, a real conversation starts.
Wow, I never realized one single sentence could open so many doors.
That's the beauty of real English. Sometimes just changing a few words changes the entire conversation.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand. But can I ask you something? How do I know which expression to use? Sometimes they all seem to mean the exact same thing.
Great question. They all talk about the future, but each one has a different feeling. "I've always wanted to visit New York" shares a long-time dream, while "I'd love to visit Alaska someday" sounds relaxed and conversational.
Ah, so they're all about the future, but they carry different feelings.
Exactly. That's what makes conversations sound natural. Native speakers don't just choose different words, they choose the expression that matches the moment.
You know what usually happens to me? Whenever I learn expressions like these, I write them down. I try to memorize them, but when I actually need them in real life, my mind goes completely blank.
That's because your brain remembers experiences, not vocabulary lists.
Imagine yourself right there on the observation deck. Someone turns to you and asks, "Is this your first time?" You naturally reply, "I've always wanted to come here."
So instead of memorizing words, I should connect them to real-life situations.
Exactly. That's why I love learning English through real places. Every place has conversations that naturally happen there. At a coffee shop, people talk about their day. At a baseball game, they celebrate together. And at the Empire State Building, people naturally talk about dreams.
Can we try a quick game? I'll say a sentence, and you make it sound more natural.
Perfect. Go ahead.
I want to travel more.
I'd love to travel more. Or, I've always wanted to travel more. It depends on the story you want to tell.
I want to speak English confidently.
My goal is to speak English confidently.
I want to visit Italy.
I've always wanted to visit Italy.
Wow, they're all so simple. I always thought sounding natural meant learning super complex vocabulary.
That's one of the biggest myths in language learning. Most natural conversations use simple words. The difference isn't the difficulty of the vocabulary, it's the way those words are connected.
I think another thing that makes me nervous is when someone asks about my goals, and suddenly I answer with just one sentence and stop talking. How can I change that?
That's where so many conversations die. But here's an easy trick. Never stop after just stating your goal. Give people the reason behind it. Instead of saying, "My goal is to become fluent in English," try saying, "My goal is to become fluent in English because I want to travel and really connect with people."
That little word, because, changes everything, right?
It really does. Because now you're not just giving information, you're giving people something they can react to, ask about, or relate to.
That makes so much sense. If someone just told me my goal is to visit Japan, I'd probably just say, "Oh, that's nice."
Exactly. But what if they said, "I've always wanted to visit Japan because I've been fascinated by their culture since I was a kid."
Oh, definitely. Now I'd want to know more. I'd probably ask, "Really? What part of the culture do you like most?"
That's the power of the why. Goals tell people what you want. Stories tell people why it matters. And people always connect with the why. That's what keeps conversations alive.
I'm finally starting to understand. Talking naturally isn't about speaking nonstop. It's about giving people something meaningful to respond to.
Spot on! And by the end of today's lesson, I'm going to show you how native speakers turn these simple answers into conversations that flow effortlessly for minutes without ever feeling forced.
Wow, I'm super excited for that. I think that's what I love most about traveling. Every place has a story.
And so do you, Emma. That's something so many language learners forget. They get so worried about speaking perfect grammar that they forget they are already interesting people with great stories to tell.
I've honestly never thought about it like that.
Think about it. You didn't decide to visit New York by accident. Something inspired you. Maybe it was a movie, a photo, or a dream you had years ago. That's what people actually enjoy hearing.
That really opens my mind. I can already imagine someone standing next to me at the top, looking at the view. Maybe they smile. Maybe we both just say, "Wow." But then what happens next?
That's actually how so many real conversations begin. One person looks at the view and says, "It's incredible, isn't it?" The other person agrees. And then one of them asks, "Is this your first time here?" That simple question opens the door. A few seconds later, you're talking about where you're from and why you came to New York.
So nobody is forced or trying too hard to make conversation. It just happens naturally.
Exactly. The place does have to work for you. That's why learning English through real-life situations is so powerful. When you understand the situation, the words come much easier.
You know what's surprising? We haven't learned a single difficult word today.
Because you don't need them. Let's compare. I want to travel versus I'd love to travel. It's the same core idea, right? Native speakers improve their conversations with small, subtle changes, not complicated vocabulary.
That's actually so encouraging. Sometimes I think I need to memorize thousands of complex words before I can have a real conversation.
Most of the time, you already know more than enough words. You just haven't learned how native speakers naturally combine them.
Can I tell you something, Liam? I think I'm going to completely change the way I practice after today.
Really? How?
Instead of writing down 10 random sentences with new vocabulary, I'm going to write 3 short personal stories. One beginning with I've always wanted to, one with I'd love to, and one with my goal is to. That feels so much closer to a real conversation.
That's honestly one of the best practice methods you could ever use, because you're not just memorizing English anymore, you're preparing to tell your own story. And people never get tired of hearing a genuine story.
Liam, earlier you promised to share one question that could completely change a conversation. I think I'm ready.
I think you are too. Most English learners believe good conversations come from having great answers. But after years of talking to native speakers, I realized something completely different. Great conversations come from asking great questions.
Really?
Absolutely. Imagine someone tells you, "I've always wanted to visit Australia." Most learners just smile and say, "Oh, that's nice." That's such a typical beginner response, right? Try asking something simple instead, like, "What inspired that dream?" Or, "How long have you wanted to go?"
Wow, those questions feel so natural.
Because they show genuine curiosity. People love talking about the stories behind their dreams. And when you ask about the story, you're no longer just practicing English, you're actually getting to know another human being.
Can I ask you one last question, Liam?
Of course, Emma.
What's the biggest lesson you've ever learned about speaking English?
For years, after every single conversation, I used to ask myself, did I use enough advanced vocabulary? But then, one day, I started asking a different question. Did I make the other person want to keep talking? And everything changed.
Just by changing that one question?
Yes, my attention stopped being on me and my anxiety. It moved to the other person. I listened more, I became more curious, and I stopped trying to impress people and started trying to understand them. Ironically, that's when my English improved the fastest.
You know, I thought today's lesson would just teach me how to talk about my life goals. And it did, but I think I learned something much bigger. Talking about dreams isn't really about English. It's about sharing a little piece of who you are.
That's beautifully said, Emma. And before we finish today, we'd love to hear from you, watching at home. What's one life goal you've always wanted to achieve? Try answering in the comments using one of today's expressions. We'd love to read your stories. And here's one last thought I'd love for you to remember. The next time someone asks about your dreams, don't focus on sounding impressive. Focus on telling your story, because stories are what people truly remember.
This morning, I thought visiting the Empire State Building was my big dream. Now I realize the real dream was feeling confident enough to share my story in English. And I think I'm finally ready for my next American adventure. I'm actually going to my very first baseball game.
And trust me, understanding the rules of the game won't even be the hardest part.
Oh boy, the fans, the traditions, the local expressions. I'm terrified I'll miss something important.
That's exactly what we're going to help you with next. Before you step into an American baseball stadium, there are a few things every English learner should know. Not just the language, but the culture behind it.
I definitely don't want to be the only person in the crowd who has no idea what's going on.
Then make sure you don't miss our next lesson. See you there.
Bye, everyone.